right, let's see. We're getting there, guys. You just got to bear with me. We got to bring everything live. All right, we are live on YouTube. We are live on Twitter. Sorry, X. We are live on, hold on, Instagram. And we are live everywhere, I think. All right. Hey, everybody, it's Dan trying to run the board and say hi to everyone. There's me, and there's my beautiful co-host, Squirrely Girl.
Hola.
How are you, Squirrely? Hola, ¿cómo está? There. Now you know all the Spanish I know.
No hablo español.
No habla español.
Well.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch? That's mine. I know German and French, but I do not know Spanish at all, although I can kind of fake my way through some of it. So how are you this week?
It's been a week.
It's been a week for me too.
It's been a week too. Yeah, it's been a week.
So we're just letting everything sync up, giving it a minute. You know how it is on the various things. So if you're just joining us, my name is Dan. Her name is Lindsay. I'm Many to Be Heard. She's Squirrely Girl 1988. And we're going to do a show every Wednesday live from 4 to 5:30. We call it Boy Meets Squirrel. Who gave us that name, by the way? That came to us from someone.
Do
you remember? I want to give them credit. I do, and I can't because I don't remember who it was.
I don't remember who said it, but it stuck, and I ran with it.
Yep, and I even got that beautiful logo for us. So we got an interesting topic for this week. For those of you just jumping in, I don't know if you've seen it. It went pretty viral, but there was a gentleman who, I forget his exact age, but I know he's over 70. And he said he was a judge in the video. I don't know if he's retired or active, but he found out a few days ago, apparently, because the video went up over the weekend, I believe, found out recently after, I guess his brother needed a kidney, if I remember right.
Yeah, somebody in his family needed something.
Yeah, so the family does all the testing. And through that, he found out that his two sons, who are 40 and 42, something like that, are not his. That's a hell of a thing to learn at 70 years old. So I did a couple videos on it. They're up on Insta, YouTube, and what's that other place I'm forgetting? Oh, yeah, TikTok.
The Clock app.
The Clock app. And actually I got quite a bit of feedback on it, and I thought that would be a great topic for this week because it is far more prevalent than people think, but it's also not as prevalent as some people think. And I want to kind of get into that and talk about really what's more important to me than anything, which is the effect it has on people. I actually, about 20 odd years ago, did an article on this for a magazine and did a ton of research on paternity fraud. Interviewed a couple of people who had experienced it. This was in 2004, 5, 6, somewhere in there. And that article actually got a lot of feedback back then. So I'm somewhat versed on it, but a little out of date. But I did research the laws. There aren't many.
No, there aren't.
In fact, in most states, I believe still, and people can correct me if I'm wrong. I know there are exceptions, but I believe most states, it's still not a crime.
In most states, you have a time limit to apply for paternity fraud.
Yep.
But in many cases, if you're married to the mother at the time, it doesn't matter if you're not biologically the father or not. You're legally responsible for that child.
I believe that is all 50 states. I do not know of a single state that has an exception if you're married. I could be wrong, and I want somebody to jump in on wherever you're at watching this. If I'm wrong on a state, let me know, because I would love to share it with the audience.
The only state I know of where there's kind of like a caveat is mine, which is Texas. But you have to suspect that you're not the father, and you have 3 years from the birth date to file for paternity, for paternity to contest it. And
Mhm.
then if that's done, you're no longer, you can get out of it. But in most cases, you don't find out about it until after that 3 years has already
Exactly.
well passed, which is kind of
Exactly.
stupid in my opinion.
Well, I mean, back in the day, and mind you, I'm 20 years out of date on it. New York State had a 2-year time limit. So if you didn't know in the first 24 months and file your petition in that time frame, you were SOL. You were dead. And if you were married, you're still SOL no matter what. So even if you proved you weren't dead, this is again older information. It may have changed, and I would love somebody to update me. I am going to research it because I'm going to do a little bit more on this topic. But when you look at it and see how prevalent it is, and we'll get into that, and see that even now, this has been going on for decades, but even now, as much as they've known it occurs, none of the legislatures in the states, and this is at a state level, the federal's never going to get involved in this. This is in the states that it's handled. The states are really not addressing it. Some have. I believe Florida has put in, they still have the presumption if you're married, but I believe they've extended the time you can contest it. But as you pointed out, and as this poor gentleman found out, he's 70 years old. It's 40 years in. There ain't
Right.
nothing he can do at this point. It's so sad to me because people don't realize how devastating it is. I remember when I interviewed, I interviewed, I think 3 guys back then. And one of them in particular was utterly devastated. He had found out the child was 8 or 9 years old, was his daughter, loved her to death, but found out he was not the father. And then to his regret, he petitioned the court about that. And the mother got pissed and cut him off from the girl. And the court sided with her because he was not the biological father. But guess what? He still had to pay child support. I mean, it was a nightmare for him.
Which doesn't that leads into something else is even if you're not biologically the father, there are many parents out there, both mothers and fathers, who choose to love a child because DNA doesn't necessarily make you mom or dad. It makes you mother or father, but it doesn't, at least in my opinion, doesn't make you mom or dad. Mom or dad is a choice. But then, so even though you're not the biological father or biological parent, you choose to continue being dad. But if mom feels spiteful, you don't get to do that either, but you're still on the hook for the bill, which is where I was telling you my quote, which is not actually a quote, it's a Squirrel Girl original, is that fatherhood has become a condition predicated on the will of the mother.
Become or always been, I would argue.
Well, parenthood is a condition predicated on the will of the mother.
There
Fatherhood is in there too, but for people who, and then they always argue about, well, reproduction rights. I'm like, what men don't have any reproductive rights.
Yeah, that's always the argument I make and I'm not revealing whether I am pro-choice or not. But the argument I always make is until you have the same choice for dads, I will not get into a debate on whether it's appropriate for mothers, because it should be either parent should be able to decide if they want to be. If you're going to let mothers take a baby and drop it at the firehouse and go, I'm done. What is it in Spanish? No mas? Is that the term?
No mas.
No mas. I'm not mom anymore, and I'm not paying a dime in support for this child. Go let it be adopted or put it in foster care or whatever. But dads can't do that.
If a mom walks away, she either leaves them at the firehouse, police station, hospital. If she gives the child up for adoption, she is considered, you made the right choice for yourself. You're brave. Yep. But if a father chooses to walk away for whatever, and it doesn't really matter what reason, he's automatically a deadbeat. And I'm like, well, that's a double standard if I ever saw one.
It is. And in those cases, by the way, I don't know if you know this, I actually was talking with a social worker 2-3 years ago about that situation. And I said, when that happens, a child is left at, say, a fire station, how much effort do you guys put into finding the father? And she just kind of looked at me and laughed. She goes, how are we going to know even where to look? Because it's an anonymous drop. And I said to her, imagine that. The dad could be out there. He may not even know he has a child. Bob drops it off at the firehouse. He's now lost the opportunity to parent this child. Someone he may have taken care of, loved, and given the best possible life. He never gets the opportunity. I can understand in some ways why they want to protect the child by making that available. You know, you know, not giving him the chance to drop it somewhere. But shouldn't at least there be some sort of requirement to say, if you know who the dad is, let us know so we can notify him and give him the opportunity as well? Well, we don't even do that.
I was reading an interesting story a couple weeks ago where it was from the child's point of view, who is now an adult. It said, my mother never wanted me, but she had a boyfriend who she'd had for all of like a week. Well, they got into a fight, and the mother's like, I never won them anyway. And she just gave the child to this man who the child did not know this guy. And he took this child that he was literally might as well have been a stranger, because he'd only been dating this woman for like 2 weeks and just met the child like a couple days ago. He took her, I believe, and said, it's going to be all right now. And then he raised her. And he's the best dad she's ever had. Now,
Wow.
I've heard, and so like that old country song, I forgot who sings it, Dad He Didn't Have to Be, about a stepdad. But in this case, it's the same principle. This was an adult who was just handed a child and decided to parent that child and raise that child rather than let them fend for themselves. And that's not the only story I've ever heard. And most of the stories I hear like that are dads. They're not moms, which is interesting from a biological standpoint, because men will often parent or raise children that are not theirs, but women adamantly won't. Some will.
No.
Some will.
My second wife was very much a parent towards the children of my first wife. Very much, to the point they call her their mom. That's an exception. Step parents would be an exception, but she was, to your point, whether I had been married to her or not, if those children needed her, she would have stepped up and become their mom. That's the type of woman you're talking about.
Yes.
Wouldn't have mattered if I was married to her or not. If she knew those children needed a mom, she would have stepped in and done it. And I will forever be grateful to her for that. But she's the exception. Most women, to your point, aren't willing to take on someone else's child. And I see it even when they do marry a man who's a father.
Well, yeah, I was reading another story, because everyone sends these things to me because they know that this is stuff I talk about. I even have my 70-something-year-old aunt doing it to me now. And so she sent me, a friend of mine sent me a story of a woman who said, she wouldn't pay for her stepdaughter's food. Her stepdaughter was in the house, in the car with her. Well, they went through a drive-through, and she wouldn't buy her stepdaughter food because she's not my child. And I'm like, if I have a car full of kids, I don't care which one of them are mine and which of them are my friends or my nieces and nephews or whatever. If there's a child in my car and I'm feeding my kids, I'm feeding all of the kids. And I just can't,
Yeah.
I don't understand how that could go through this person's head as an acceptable behavior.
I remember seeing that video and I was like, you got to be kidding me. Because I would be just like you. And many times I did have kids that weren't mine in the car. I coached Little League. I coached Pop Warner. Sometimes I had to take those kids home with my kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe mom or dad couldn't do them. And I always let the parents know, hey, if for some reason you can't come get the kids, let me know ahead of time. I'll be more than happy to bring them home. And if I was stopping somewhere because, my kids are in the car and they want, let's say, McDonald's or whatever, absolutely I was buying it for this kid was not mine. Yeah, I was on my team, right? But can you imagine sitting in a car and you're going, yeah, you can have it, but you're not my kid, so you're not getting it? That's just evil in my mind. And I honestly, are there men that would do that? Sure, I'm sure there are, but I can't think there's very many that would.
I can see maybe younger guys who haven't quite got bit with the paternity bug, like my eldest nephew who's what 22. That might not occur to him if he had because he does mentorships, so that
Mhm.
might not occur to him. But then you get the excuse of youth. Um, the men who don't do it are the ones who are just guilty of just being general assholery,
Yeah.
just but I know far more women who use the excuse, well, they're not mine. They're not my kids. I don't want to pay for
Mhm.
them. No, but then in reverse, if they say I don't want to pay for other people's kids, but then if you have their kids for whatever reason, why didn't you buy them dinner?
It doesn't. Yeah,
Huh?
it does not go both ways. Yeah, and there are instances where they'll deliberately leave their kids with someone else to get them fed. I've seen that.
Yes, I've seen that quite a bit.
You know,
I've gotten caught with which is one of the reasons why I don't do mom groups.
among others, right?
Among others, well most of it because
But
and I,
we'll leave it at that.
and it's not the kid's fault. I'm never going to and everyone always said people say you don't like kids. I go, I have no problem with kids. To be honest, I mean, I'll say I can only deal with my kids, not everyone's kids. What
Mm.
that really means is I don't like their parents. The kids are fine. They're just a reflection of their parents. If they're little demons, then that's not really, I mean, kids are kids, but to most extent, if they're absolutely horrors, kids aren't naturally evil. They're blank slates. So if they're behaving that way, they were taught this behavior is okay. So I have less problem with the kid and far more problem with the parents.
Well, I can't stand kids now, but I'm 60 years old. I'm allowed to be that. Get off my lawn, guy.
Get off my lawn.
Because I raised 6 kids. My house was the house. There wasn't a weekend for 20 years that I didn't have somebody's kids sleeping over. Loved every minute of it. But you know what? I did my time in prison.
You did
I,
your time.
I want my
Hmm.
peace and quiet, you know. But let's kind of get back to the paternity fraud. So one of the things that when I put out my video, which I highlighted what the judge had said and talked a little bit about just how prevalent it is. I did 2 parts on TikTok and Instagram, and it's one video on YouTube. But in part one, I was talking about how prevalent it is, and there's a lot of misinformation on that. So a common number you'll see thrown out is that roughly 30% of cases are paternity fraud. The guy that's the named father is proven not to be the father. The thing that people don't understand about that is that's cases where they've actually suspected they weren't the father,
Hmm.
petitioned to court, and got a DNA test done. So you can't take that number and apply it to everywhere. And I see that a lot where it's, well, a third of all children are the dad is not the dad. That's not true. All right. The other side of it is the little bit of research that's been done, and there is not a lot, and that's deliberate, by the way, puts the number, depending on the study you look at. I've seen anywhere from 1 to 2%. But more recent ones, there was a study done in 22 that said it was 11, and another done last year that said it was 12. I think my personal opinion is it's somewhere in the middle. It's somewhere, I put it between 5 and 10,
Hmm.
which is a huge number. And getting back to that 30%, I've had lawyers reach out to me. In fact, one reached out to me this morning to go, that 30% is too low. I'm seeing 70, 80% of disputed cases coming back. The dad is not the dad. Take that for what it's worth. But even if you go as low as, let's say, and I used in my video, 5%, there's 3.6 million births in the US every year. That puts it somewhere around 200,000 cases of paternity fraud every year. It's not
With
200,000 cases total. It's this year, next year. So you're talking millions of cases. It's a huge problem.
yes, it is, and it's for lack of a better word, as we were discussing this morning through text, is it's state sanctioned because the government refuses to do anything to punish those who are guilty of it. You can be blatantly guilty of it, and they're like, well, for the best interest of the child, wouldn't the best interest of the child being knowing who their biological father is? And in many cases, the people that are being put on the who is named the father for whatever reason is not the best person to be the father. Like the
It's the
small
one who
group,
makes the most money,
yeah.
almost invariably.
Well, yes, and a woman can but just because he makes money doesn't mean him that he would be a good dad.
Oh, absolutely
But
not.
what I think is absolutely telling is that a woman can uh put a man's name on a birth certificate that she has never met. She just
Yep.
knows his name. She could go look through his name and find it in a phone book, put his name on a line. He's never met this woman in real life, and the court will hold him liable,
Yep.
responsible.
There
And
are
I'm like,
there are cases out there where that's exactly that has happened. Where I know of one, and I forget which state it was in, where the man found out, the state found him actually. So the woman had gotten pregnant, put his name on the birth certificate. Some years later, she went to get welfare, which then requires them to try and find the dad. And then, long story short, found him. He gets a letter in the mail. You now owe thousands in back child support. And oh, by the way, going forward, he's like, I've never even met this woman. And
there
it
was
held
another
up in court.
there was another woman. This was in California where he got out of jail, out of prison for some misdemeanor, and then got immediately slapped with, "Oh, you owe all this child
Oh, yeah.
support." For a woman that gave birth while he was in jail, and he had been in jail far more than the 9 months, preceding. So, like, unless it's immaculate conception, there's no way possible that he could have been the father. And the court's like, oh well.
And I want to get your opinion on this. There's two reasons that, from the guy's perspective, and my research that I did way back when, and even recently, there's two primary reasons why women commit paternity fraud. And we have to say it's women, by the way, because men can't commit paternity fraud by definition, right? Sorry, ladies, I'm not trying to be a sexist pig, but that's the reality. But the two reasons, one is money's number one. They're going to name the guy they can get the most money out of. But two is, if they're married to the guy, they don't want to acknowledge that they or get caught cheating. So they'll commit fraud then and keep doing it even post divorce, because they don't want anyone to ever found out that cheated, much like happened in this judge's case, right? I don't know if he's going through a divorce. I don't know if he's still going to say he's the dad or he's going to try and claim otherwise. Now it's irrelevant. They're 40 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But if we take that case, the facts of that case, and take it down to, let's assume he's 21 instead of 70, and go through all that, what would the mom do at that point? Would she continue to have kept the lie going? Who knows? But I think most cases they would.
Well, you say there's two reasons. I say there's really only one, and that is an avoidance or absolution of responsibility. The mom doesn't want to raise them or take care of them on her own. She wants the support of someone else because she can't do the responsibility on her own, or doesn't want. She goes, I can't do it on my own. That's complete and utter BS. You can, you just don't want to. And then in the case of cheating, they don't want to take responsibility for the fact that they cheated. So it comes down to you want to absolve yourself. A woman wants to absolve herself of her terrible choices, which was another one of my favorite quotes is, everything happens for a reason. And sometimes that reason is you're an idiot.
She said it, not me. That would be Squirrel Girl, 1988.
But that's why they do it. They don't want the responsibility of raising a child alone. They want the help that comes along with it. So they want to get the money is the medium which that help comes in. But way back in yesteryear, it was quite common for a woman to have relations outside of wedlock and then wed the first man that even looked at her that way, so that she could convince him that it was his. And that is the subject and plot point in thousands of historical dramas, real life histories. So I mean, this is not a new phenomenon. Women have been doing this shit for eons. Um
I'm
because
just
they want
picturing every Hallmark movie there is right now. You know how they have the ones at Christmas? You know, boy meets girl, blah, blah. It's the same plot and everyone. I'm betting Hallmark should come out with something like this for during the summertime.
probably.
It would make millions.
But I mean, they do this, and they don't want because they need the help, the support, because raising children is expensive. One of the funniest things my son ever said was, he was sitting in the car, said, "You're expensive," and he goes, "But mommy, I don't cost any money." My dad
Yeah.
died laughing.
I would I would have said, let me explain the facts of life to you there, son.
But that's the first reason, and then of course, the second half of that same irresponsible coin is, I done effed up and I don't want to admit that I effed up. So I'm just going to lie and hope nobody notices.
Do you think, again, I'm not a woman, so I can't put myself in their shoes with this, but do you think, I mean, you're talking about responsibility,
Mhm.
but do you think they even think for a second that it's going to come out, they're going to get caught,
Of
or do
course
they
not.
just disregard it completely?
No, any woman who lies about who the father is never, never ever thinks she's going to get caught, which is actually kind of ironic because women make terrible liars. I say this
See, I
because
disagree with you on this. I think you're far better liars than men are, but go ahead.
we lie more. We
You're
we we
masters
make
at it.
we
I'm
we
sorry. I
lie
disagree with
more
you.
often, but in matters of this, in this particular arena, we're terrible at it because we always think they'll never know. They'll never know. They'll never figure it out. And the best lies are the ones with a grain of truth in them.
Mhm.
And that seems to be a lesson that most of the women who do this just do not learn, because I've gotten very good at kind of spotting some of these when I'm in um groups and whatnot, especially for SA victims, is a lot of the women are in there that they shouldn't be in that group. They're there because, again, they did something they weren't supposed to, and they want that get out of. Well, I was assaulted, so it's not my fault. And the ones that tell the most elaborate, convoluted stories are the ones that are guiltier than sin. I mean, like,
Yeah, I would agree with you on that for sure. You know, it's
but
interesting
no,
because
they have never ever think that they're going to get caught, and
see,
and
to
often I get
me,
told, sorry.
logically, I could see that in like the 70s, 80s, 90s. But now DNA testing is out there. You got, was it 123 and Me? You got Ancestry. You got all these places that you can go get your own DNA test done. You don't need a court order. I gotta believe, and that's why I'm asking you, because apparently my thought is wrong, that women would be a little bit smarter, because back in the day, again, when I was doing the research 20 years ago, you had to get a court order to get a DNA test. It was fairly new. They weren't
Mhm.
available publicly. You had to go to a judge and say, I suspect I'm not the dad. The judge then could have the option of ordering it, or more often than not, they did not order it because they didn't want to let the guy off the hook. But that was the whole process. Now it's as simple as ordering, what is it, $80 DNA test, sending it off, and then doing the same for your kid. You're going to know, it's going to come back.
Well,
So
I think that's where they get into the problem of, well, I've never given him any reason to suspect me. Oh, trust me, Patricia, you have. But they do the thing where they get elaborate in their lies, and eventually they do something that the guy suspects them of, because, like, why wouldn't my kid needs a blood transfusion, right? He broke his leg or something. Why wouldn't she want me to give it to him? Or an organ transplant, or something to do with the hospital, or
Mhm.
she insists that she's the only one who can talk to the doctors or the nurses. What they say is that the truth will out. But there's also the manipulation tactic that comes into that of if a man comes up and asks, am I the father? Do you mind getting a DNA test? You don't trust me? How can you possibly not trust me? And the thing is, if you know what the answer is going to be, there's absolutely nothing to worry about. If my husband, Mr. Squirrel, were to walk with me and go, I want a DNA test for the boys, like, go ahead, it's your money. Because I know what the answer is going to be.
Right. Well, that's, it always amazes me. One of the arguments, again, I'm using older stuff, but I think it still holds true now. One of the arguments that women will often make to support paternity fraud is to say, well, sometimes I'm not sure who the dad is.
Hold on 1 second.
You don't? Yeah, go ahead. So you're going to tell me that you don't know who you slept with? I mean, I've never understood that logic where you're going to sit there and go, well, I'm not sure who the dad is. Okay, the next step should be, well, don't you want to know for your children's sake who dad actually is instead of just randomly picking some guy, which is what they do.
Okay, so the argument that is made that I don't know who the father is absolute crap. Do you want to know why?
I agree. Yeah, I think so. Well, why? That's the question. Up. Go do what you got to do. I'll take over while you do it.
Sorry, my husband came home. My husband came home.
Poor mom.
My husband came home and then he locked the door immediately behind him, knowing that the children would be home themselves.
He's a
5
smart
minutes
man.
behind him.
He's a smart man.
But it's absolute, this argument that I don't know who the father is. There is a narrow window of about 8 days in a month that a woman can get pregnant. It is actually more difficult these days to get pregnant than it is to not get pregnant. So there's a little narrow window of fertility. And I personally think that if you're going to be having intercourse, you should be responsible enough to track that window, a little bit of responsibility, just, throwing that out there. And so if you seriously do not know who the father is because you've had so many partners within that tiny little window of 8 days, then
yeah, it doesn't speak well of your personages. I'm going to be nice about it. But even still, my thought on that whole process, let's say it was, I don't know, I'm just picking a number, 3 guys. Wouldn't you want to know which one is actually the father? For your child, forget everything else. What if your child does need a kidney in 10 years? Wouldn't you want to know which one it is? I don't get, I'm asking you, Lindsay, because as a woman.
I mean, I would.
Explain it to me, Lucy, because I don't get why you wouldn't want to know.
The only thing I can come back to is it's that gut reflex of I did something wrong and I don't want to be held to task for it. I don't want anyone to look down on me, which of course these days you don't get looked down upon for having multiple partners.
No, they're celebrating it now.
So it doesn't, the reasons why women kept quiet 100 years ago are no longer apply now societally. Mm-hmm. But in my experience, regardless of how intelligent a woman is, regardless of how well off social economically she is, women in general do not like being criticized, even if it's something like constructive criticism. Mm-hmm. They don't like to be told that anything they did is wrong or slightly off color, or they're not perfect the way they are. They can't justify their actions, and someone might not buy their justification for it.
And see, I find it fascinating to hear that logic because, as I talked about, one, it's very easy to get the testing done, right? If you know, all right, it's one of, I'm using three guys, you can do all that without anyone ever finding out other than those guys, right? Because obviously you need their DNA also. But so that thought of shame, I get it, especially back in the day. But now, sure, it's still there a little bit, but it's nothing like it used to be. Like as you even pointed out, to me, I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm a guy and I just, y'all be crazy. Sorry. Um, I just
No,
cannot
that's fair.
fathom. I just cannot fathom being a parent, whether you're mom or dad. I'd want to know, right? So if there was a chance that I wasn't the father, I would, and you came to me and said, "Look, Dan, it could be you or it could be, Jane, Jim, Joe, whatever." I would say to her, I want to know. Now, a lot of people would say, well, you want to know because you don't want to pay support.
Yeah,
No,
isn't that's always the argument is you don't
always
you,
the
you just
argument.
want to get out of paying?
But I want to know if the child is mine, it's the exact opposite. I do want to pay support. I want that child in my life. I want to take care of that child. I want to step up and be dad. Are there exceptions to that belief? Absolutely. But I got to tell you, probably 95% of the guys would think exactly that same way. Let us know in the comments if you agree or disagree with me on that. But most guys want to know because if they are, they're going to step up, not try and run away. The other side of it is, I don't want to be paying for somebody else's kid. That I'll be blunt about, you know.
While there are some dads who that's a perfectly legitimate thing, I don't want to pay for someone else's kids. There's also a large section of them that if there is a legitimate, like if she's honest with him and says, um, I was with someone right before we got together. There's a possibility that this child might not be yours. And but you have to give him that option. But this person might
That's
like,
the
I
difference.
I want to be a dad. And it doesn't matter because the child is part of you and I'll be raised just like if you're adopting a child. It's the same sort of thing. He's given that choice. But the woman has to give him that choice. And in many cases, I think it comes down to control. Women don't want to cede their control of the situation.
Right. I
And
do think that's a very big reason why.
women are panicky by nature. A lot of us will panic very easily.
Again, it's Squirrely Girl 1988.
and and by that I mean
I love
we're and I'm guilty of this just as much as I will work myself up into a tizzy over stuff that's stupid. And my husband will sit there and go, honey, is this important? No. Should maybe you let it go? Yes. Do you want to let it go? No, I can't. Okay. Sit down, have some coffee, and think about it for a while. But we'll make mountains out of molehills. And so something that is this big problem in our head that we've worked ourselves up into this impossible, painted ourselves into a corner. Oh my God, it's terrible. And then you present it to like your guy friend and they're like, that's it. Well, why don't you and they'll just cut through the bullshit straight to the heart of the problem and go, there's your problem. And they'll be like, well, I can't do that. It's complicated. It's really not. That'd be like you need to drive from San Antonio to Houston, really. And the guy will go, okay, you get on I-10 and you drive straight through, but the woman wants to drive all the way up to Montana and then Connecticut and then around. And because they have put all of these,
I'm picturing that shopping meme, the one where the guy walks in, picks up what he wants, and leaves, and the woman's going through every aisle. Yeah, that.
Yeah, like a drunk squirrel weaving around trying to find acorns. And we will impose limitations or parameters around a situation that don't necessarily, like, they're self-imposed. Like, you have all these rules before you can get to point B, but these rules are completely self-imposed. They're not state mandated. They're not, nobody actually made them. They're not real obstacles. They're entirely self-created and self-imposed. But boy, will we stick to them. We're like, these are the rules. But why? Like, why? And it's because we have to control the situation, like micromanage it. And then if anyone tries to take that control away from us, we froth up the mouth, like, and get very, very angry.
I got a rabbit
because
squirrel in my hand right now.
Because somebody threw like like the old Looney Tune commercials where they're running around and the coyote throws out a hole and the runner has to stop because there's now a hole in the road. pothole.
Mm.
And they're like, this wasn't part of the plan. No, but it might be. You could either adapt or you could panic. And in many, many, many cases, far too many because we're having this conversation, the woman panics. And when women panic, they take they take all their ducks, or there's, in my case, squirrels in a tree because I don't have ducks or a row, and they cling to them tighter, which only causes more trouble. It's like the women who they get caught, either they cheated or they lied, committed paternity fraud, and rather than just come clean, they double down almost every time.
Oh,
No,
they'll
no, I
fight it
didn't.
tooth and nail.
They will fight it tooth and nail,
Oh
even
my
when they are
God.
literally being hit with the evidence. I didn't do it.
I
And it
mean,
was like,
you'll see it in family court, right? Because if when you have these cases in most states, you're going to go in front of a judge in family court. Now, these women have to know. All right, well, it's not his kid. I'm about to get found out if that judge orders it. Why not just come clean? Nope. They're going to make them go through the whole Are they hoping the DNA test won't figure it out with a 99% possibility of? I just sit there and go, I can't fathom the logic. It's just come clean at that point. Why are you going to make them go through all this? If he suspects it and he's filed a petition in family court, it's going in front of a judge.
I think this is a wonderful example of you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, and or denial is a very powerful thing.
It is. Or,
Even
like you
when,
said, they'll triple down, forget double down, they'll triple down on it at that point.
I mean, I've watched interviews where they have the mom, and I know polygraphs aren't 100% reliable, but they got the mom hooked up to a polygraph, and she's sitting there spewing out the same lie, and it's going, no, 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 no. And it was right that she goes, no, no, I'm telling the truth. I swear, I'm honest. I swear on my grandma's grave. And they're like, and now we've determined that's a lie.
You
And
just
they
went,
have,
Paul, was it Maury? Was that the show that Maury did all the tests? You just went, we just determined that's a lie. That was where that came from.
and
You just channeled it.
I did. And, but they have almost deep, deep down, they have to know that it's a lie, but they have, on the surface of their thoughts, they have tricked themselves into believing their own lie.
Yeah, I do agree with you on that a lot. I do think that's the case more often than not, to be honest with you. Is they've bought into it so much themselves that to them it's not a lie. They actually believe he's the dad. Which leads me to which is the effect it has, right? So going back to that initial video that I'm going to call him the judge because I don't know his name, made, I heard the pain in his voice. I heard the sadness. I heard the anger also, right? This man is hurting. He's 70 whatever years old. He finds out his two sons that he's raised and are now 40 years old. And he does a little bit, I still have to take care of him. He calls them deadbeats and all that. I'm leaving that part out. That was his anger coming out. But I heard the pain that this man is feeling. And having interviewed people that have gone through this, both the parent and the child, the pain that they deal with, the sense of loss, because especially the child, they're like, well, if he's not my dad, who is my dad? And more often than not, the mother won't tell them. I've had multiple ones say, Mom won't tell me who my dad is. They just feel like they're in this nether world where they don't have a parent, kind of like an adopted child might feel. I don't know. It's very interesting to me that people, they look at the dad, the one that's been falsely claimed to be dad. Yes, he's suffering. Absolutely. But there's also other victims. There's two other victims in this case that no one talks about. There is the children, and there's the man who could have been dad, which we touched on earlier. So there's three victims of this crime, and it should be a crime. It's not in many states. And nobody really thinks about the child. Nobody really thinks about the other dad. But all three of those victims are feeling tremendous pain out of this if they find out. And I just find it sad that that a woman would do that to three different people. And two, as we talked about earlier, the government, the states, the family courts are suborning it. And frankly, I feel encouraging it. What do you think?
I think that no one ever thinks about the kids ever. And what the truly sad part is that in any other crime where there's that many victims, people would be jumping up to, we have to do something about it. But because the people who commit the crime, and again, guys can't commit paternity fraud, so it's only women,
Mm-hmm.
we're bending over backwards to make excuses for them. Well, she needed someone to take care of it, the kid. Okay, well, in the day and age of the strong, independent woman who's just called, being an adult these days, why couldn't she do it? Why did she need to do this to someone? Because if you commit fraud against anyone else, you're going to go to jail. But for some reason, this reproductive fraud, that's okay. As a result, because we have reproductive fraud, we now have effectively human trafficking, which is the kids, because you can take,
There's a
you
take.
can you can use the government, because the government's going to get money out of it, because we have most of the people who commit paternity fraud are getting child support out of it, because that's one of the reasons why they do it, is for that lovely green stuff. Because the government benefits from this, we have effectively begun to participate in human trafficking. We're having children and using them basically as cash cows because someone is paying for them, be they the father, the parent or not. And in many cases, the dads that are on child support for these kids, they are completely responsible. The mother doesn't do anything. In many cases, the mothers will keep having kid after kid after kid and doing this with multiple dads in order to just, she's making money by having children, which I thought that was illegal.
It should be.
It should be.
But it's not. It's interesting, that whole thing. Like we were talking about it not being a crime. And again, things may have changed, but at the last I knew, for example, in New York, as late as 2017, 2018, they would not prosecute a case of known paternity fraud. They will not take it up. It's fraud. So they'll claim there's no law against paternity fraud specifically. They'll claim it falls under the fraud statute, but they also state emphatically they will never prosecute it, ever. So you're encouraging it in that case. You're hurting 3 victims. For what reason? As a state.
And that's the part that makes no sense to me, because assuming that it is a case of paternity fraud, and we know that the state gets reimbursed for every dollar of child support it collects, between 40 and 66 cents for every dollar, depending on the state, then it's not like the dad, if they were to find, it's not like the state would be losing money, because either this man who's not the father is on child support, or they go and find the real dad who should be on child support. So they're not losing money.
Exactly.
Which makes no sense to me. Which makes me think that there's something else going on here, because in music, when you're expecting a melody, the most profound thing you can do is have a beat of silence, or a bar of silence, or silence can almost be as profound as the melody. And when you have the absence of something, like in this case, a logistical reason why something is not being done, it makes you wonder why.
I've talked with politicians about that, and most of them are clueless, by the way. Let's just say that up front. And most of them don't care. But the ones that have actually
the only ones who actually care are the ones who have had it happen to them.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. But the ones that actually will acknowledge it, that it's a problem, and all the things we just discussed will say, well, yeah, that puts the burden on the state to have to go find the other dad. That's their excuse, which is, to me, is as ludicrous as any other excuse. Oh, you poor things. You're paying these people anyway. Make them go find the dad. But, it's too much work for, child support to have to go find this guy. Are you kidding me? It's just, the whole thing is just at a level of absurdity. And and this is where I want to go now. And then we'll get into the comments, guys, because there are a flood of comments that we got to get. A lot of squirrel sightings, by the way. But here's how easy this could be fixed. Just like that, the problem could go away. Mandatory DNA testing at birth. Done.
Problem solved.
End of discussion. It's literally that easy. But they will not do it. And it is, in my opinion, it will never, ever become law. Because they're so afraid of finding out the truth. That's why they don't study it, by the way. They don't want the studies out there because they know it. The number's probably somewhere around 5-10% realistically. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine that 10 out of every 100 babies, the dad is not who they think it is? 3 million births a year. If it's 10%, that's 300,000 kids a year are being raised by a dad they don't know is not their dad. They don't want that out there. So that's why it'll never be that simple a solution.
Which is, you think that the government, who, of course, then again, it's very, very easy to spend other people's money. It's a little bit harder to spend your money. So they really don't care about the necessarily the money saving aspect of it, because none of it's their money to begin with anyway. But it would cost less money to run the paternity tests at birth than it would to supposedly find the dad.
I'm
long down the line.
What does a birth cost these days? Like when your last son was born, what was the cost? Not what you had to pay, but like the bill to the insurance.
The bill to the insurance was $32,000.
All right, it went up quite a bit. My last daughter that was born, it was somewhere around 10, but that was 1996. So let's say $30,000. A DNA test from 123andMe or any of the other is less than $100. I don't think $100 is that much to ask. Come on. I mean, it is that ludicrous when you look at, we're going to spend $30,000 to bring the child into the world. What's another $100? Come on. That's an aspirin in hospital terms. It is literally that simple. And yet politicians will not do it. I've talked to them. I've lobbied for this. We tried to get passed in New York back in the day. Mandatory DNA testing. They'll sit there, they'll look you right in the eye and go, yeah, we're never going to even take that up, because they're afraid of the women's groups. The women's groups are opposed to it.
Well, that's what it comes back to. I mean, the ninnies from now, our lovely friends, are the ones who say, well, they're calling all women liars. Well, if you want to prove that we're not, just take the test. The way to prove that you're not lying is to not double down and continue to say, I'm not lying. It's to prove that you're not lying. And the easiest way to do that is just to take the test. The only thing that you do by denying the test is to prove that you've got something to hide.
Right. And it's mandatory for everyone to have the test. There's nothing to be worried about you're being thought of as a liar.
I did see one very amusing take. It was shared by this one woman on X, Twitter, back when it was still Twitter, posted this, and then a whole bunch of women chimed in, and I just had to laugh that these are the people that are reproducing in this country. Not only are they reproducing, but they're driving and they're voting. They go, well, if the men have to take the DNA test, why don't the women? How do they know it's their child? And I'm like,
no, they didn't.
They did. They did.
They were joking, right? Come on.
I was like, please tell me this is satire. Please tell me this is satire. And I reading the comments, and no.
Oh my, I'm not saying another word on that.
And these people drive.
And vote.
And are raising the next generation.
So let's get into some of the comments because I have many. There are many, many. I'm probably not going to get to them all, but I'm going to start over on YouTube. Scott and X. Scott said the same thing happens in the UK. I want to make clear because also Andy on Instagram said, "How can you be responsible if you're not the father?" And he's from Liverpool, England. Um, it happens everywhere, guys. It's not just a US problem. It's not just a UK problem. Australia, New Zealand, Japan. I've heard of cases in every Western country. I'll use the air quotes on that. I would argue in every country it happens. It's not unique to the United States. We're just using the states because we happen to live here. But I would never tell anyone from the UK it doesn't happen there. In fact, there was one study I remember years ago. They actually did. It was somewhat legitimate. That this was in the 90s, late 90s, if I remember, that put the number at 2%. And they said, see, it's no big deal. It's only 2%. And I'm like,
2%.
That's 2% of your population that thinks their dad, who they think is their dad, is not their dad. And you're okay with that? It was ludicrous, but it happens everywhere. So yeah, it's a worldwide problem. And again, there's a very, very simple solution. There was another quote there. Jeep Dan said, I thought that this was the Ancestry database stats. I honestly don't know if Ancestry's got anything on that. I do know of situations where people have gone, this is why they're trying to change the rulings on Ancestry, where people have gone and gotten DNA tests to do their family tree and found out, oops, dad is not my dad. And it's created issues for Ancestry. I know 123andMe had a case like that. Why you would sue the companies for finding out it's not
why
their fault.
Like, I lied and you caught me, so I'm going to sue you. And I'm like,
That it's again, and I don't know who did the suit, but so
Can
Doctor, is this an episode of Hoarders? What? I don't get that one. Sorry.
I think they mean all of
Your
my
sewing
sewing
stuff?
supplies, my collection of fabric.
Just because you don't have the cute little dinosaur and lion like I have. Those are my dog's things and my granddaughter's. So Marlin family said the fight against payouts that false accusations get now is almost impossible to fight. I will tell you, I wanted to touch on that briefly. I've worked with guys that have tried to fight it. You're talking tens of thousands of dollars in family court. And there's a very, very good chance, you file your motion. You got to hire the lawyer. The lawyer's going to tell you, I want a retainer of $10, $15, $20,000, which you're not getting back if the judge goes, nope, I'm not doing it. You're out that money. And like I said, the judge can simply go, no, I'm not ordering it. And if the statute of limitations is passed, you're SOL. So it is extremely expensive. And even if you win, if you prove beyond a doubt with DNA that you are not the father, you still can be ordered to pay child support, even though you were defrauded because you, and I quote, acted like the father.
You accepted the responsibility when you were ignorant of the truth. Therefore, you're on the hook forever, even when you know it, which I think is that's the encouraging part. They're like, well, you accepted the responsibility when you thought it was true. So now that you found out that it's not true, well, just sorry.
It's ridiculous. And then he follows it up with, if the consequences were equal, truly equal, things would change. A lot of deadbeat moms would be exposed. That's why you'll never see it passed, because they don't want the moms exposed. It is a much bigger problem than people realize. It's not 30, 50, 70%, whatever number you want to use. I'll never agree with that. I'll grant that. I just don't believe for a second that 1/3 of all babies born, the named father is not the father. Again, I personally believe it's somewhere between 5 and 10%. Maddie, the Anti-Alienation Project, who's an awesome girl, an awesome woman, I should say. If you guys are not following the Anti-Alienation Project on all of the channels that you're watching this on, go follow them. The work Maddie's doing is amazing. She said, do you think paternity fraud is a form of SA? Sorry, I almost said the word. What do you think, Linz? Is it? It's a good question.
SA, yes, or no. Maybe not even SA. It can depending on how it is obtained. It can be at least S, misconduct. Because I mean,
Interesting. I
if that's a dangerous I'm always very, very hesitant to muddy those particular waters as a
and that's where
victim
I'm at.
myself.
Yeah, yeah. Same here. Same here.
Because you have the extreme cases of like violent R where you're beaten to within an inch of your life and
Yeah.
suffer. And then they want to add this on top of it and say that it's in the same ballpark, and it's really not. It is misconduct. It
I
is
think it's
misconduct.
fraud. I would not call it SA or R.
Mm-mm.
I think it is fraud. I personally believe it should be a separate, distinct loss legality, separate from general fraud. Like somebody who defrauds a retiree out of their retirement income, that type
Mm-hmm.
of thing. I think it's along the lines. I don't think it's SA. I see the point.
Yeah, I
I
see
don't
the
think it
point.
goes to that level. I see the point, but I don't want to take it there because I'm trying to think of a reason why I would support it. I can't say that I would, so I'm going to leave it at that. Mike B said, "I wonder how they handle this in Saudi Arabia." To the best of my knowledge, and correct me if you know, Lindsay, dads pretty much get custody in Saudi Arabia.
Saudi
So
Arabia is an actual patriarchy. The mothers have no right to their children, and R isn't really it's not really a thing.
yeah,
It has a definition in the dictionary, but legally it doesn't exist.
yeah, and I don't want to get political on it, but yeah, I don't agree with that situation.
But
Uh,
in a true patriarchy, this is the thing that nobody ever understands is like before I believe it's 1863. I forget her name, but she was an English woman who she went before the House of Lords and she got it changed so that the mother has a right to her children in the event of a divorce. And it used to be that even in the event of the divorce, only the husband could ask for a divorce. A woman couldn't ask for
yep,
a divorce. But even
right.
then, if a man divorces his wife, um, the mother had no right to the children. Well, she is one of the pioneers that got it changed so that a mother has a right to her children in the event of a divorce. But prior to that, women in a true patriarchy, women have no right to their children. None.
Right. And that's not right. I think
No.
anyone watching this would agree with that. And if you don't agree with that, leave. I'm sorry. I'm never going to agree with you on that. Bogart Terry said, people who go, well, that's why people who go to prison for not paying child support and they prove that it's not got one major lawsuit against the state that put him in prison. In other words, what he's saying basically is there are men sitting in jail for not paying child support for children that they know and have proven are not theirs. Let that sink in, ladies and gentlemen. I want someone in the notes to defend that to me. So if you're someone who thinks it's okay, you let me know. I'd be curious to know what you think, why you think that way, because that to me is absurd. Quick, just want to do shout outs to the people that have sent gifts. I can't say your name because it's in Arabic. Sent a rose. Thank you. Bite Giver sent a TikTok. A bad PR Rose, a TikTok, Sitting Gwevin, a heart. Thank you, all of you, for that. All right, I'm jumping into TikTok comments now. Get ready, Linz. There's a ton of them, and they're all
I'm ready.
good.
I'm
I've been
ready.
watching them go by. So RP John, who's one of our regular listeners, says happens way more often than women will ever acknowledge. That is a fair point. We've kind of touched on that, but if you actually look at it, most of the time, I want to generalize it to women. I will say feminists rather than women. They'll deny it even exists at all, or if it does, it's just a fraction. But yet, the numbers don't lie. It is what it is. John from Washington State, Eastern Washington. I love watching your show. Well, thank you, John. But Lindsay gets all the credit for the awesomeness of it.
Hey, now it's only fair.
I give you the love. John said, I know women where the man still doesn't know his kids are his biologically. I know of an instance where I have been told, and it's a tough situation for me. The dad The mom had an affair. They had a child as a result of that affair. The dad does not know that it's not his kid, and I'm aware of it, and I've kept my mouth shut. I struggle with that, but I don't want to be the one to open that can of worms, if you will. What do you think?
I think that's one of those. It's a case by case basis, because on one hand, I don't want to necessarily. On one hand, I want to punish the mom, but on the other hand, I don't want to punish the dad and the child who have a very loving relationship.
Right.
Because if he finds out, there's every chance that that child might lose one or both parents, because they'll lose the one parent who's not really their parent, and they'll lose the other parent because then the other parent will be so busy fighting the wrong parent that the child kind of gets dropped between the cracks. And I've seen that happen.
Oh, I've seen. The other thing you'll see too is you'll lose the mom will lose the child, because if it gets found out, and the child, depending on the age of the child will resent the mother for it and walk away from them. But in this particular situation, I found out, I won't say how, but I found out indirectly, and I let her know I had found out, and she's like, "You can't say anything," and I struggle with it, but to me, it comes down to the child. I don't want to be the one to open that can of worms for that child. And the child is 12, 13 now. It's something I struggle with, though. It's not a place that I want to be in, but unfortunately, I'm there. It's Legend, who's one of our regulars also. How's the old saying go? A man's lie, I love you. A woman's lie, it's your baby. I like that one. Lindsay, what is the biggest lie that women tell men?
You're makeup. My first?
Nope, makeup.
Oh yeah. So I got called. They always go after my looks, because I'm not wearing any makeup now, and I don't actually put on makeup if I'm going to make a TikTok video, because why would I? It's a lot of effort for just like a 10-minute thing, and I don't like wearing makeup. But this woman went after my looks, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to take moral advice from a woman whose entire face could be factory reset with a baby wipe.
I remember seeing that comment. I died laughing. You notice the ones that always make those comments have the cat pictures up as their profile pic.
Or yeah, I got made, and then she goes, "Well, I'm beautiful." I was like, "You're like a 3," and I got called out for a harassment and bullying, because like, how could you call her a 3? She opened her mouth and she went immediately from a 7 to like negative points, because what just came out was vitriol.
True. Ernesto said, being a father nowadays is an act of faith, the faith that the baby is his. I wouldn't say nowadays. I would say that's always been the case, because we make it seem like this just suddenly happened in current society. This has been going on forever, forever and ever.
I have a really bad joke that would get me in trouble.
Yeah, don't get us banned. April 24th, Tennessee did pass a paternity fraud law from Ant Dime. Ant Dime, can you tell? You may have done it. I haven't scrolled down far enough. Let me know specifics on that law. I'm curious on it. Is that a new passage, or I know they passed some other laws, but
I knew they were trying to pass one. I didn't know if they actually passed it.
That's what I knew too. Logical thinker. It's the consent. Angel Warrior, another regular. Paternity fraud is so easy to hide. That's why they get it. So yeah, it is very easy to hide. Now, I'm going to reveal something. You sitting down? I may be a case of paternity fraud, and I will tell you why. My father is was 5'6", with dark black hair. I have 2 stepbrothers. One is passed, one is still alive. They are like 5'7", 5'8", with dark black hair. I am 6'1", with red hair. And oh, by the way, they're rail thin and have to drink Ensure shakes just to stay the way they are. And I'm not. there is a known big secret in the generation. Nobody knows what the secret is, and that whole generation is pretty much past. I think I'm it, but I can't prove it.
I mean, genetics are tricky, but not that tricky.
My mother was brown hair. My father had black hair. There is not a redhead on either side of the family until me. Oh, by the way, my parents divorced when I was 9 months old. Just saying. So, I could be. I have never done the testing because I don't have a problem getting a DNA test, but I can't get my dad's DNA. He passed 12 years ago, so I would have to find somebody else in the family. But yeah, that's why I say you never know. And he'd still be my dad, but it's something I've always wondered about. Wow. Blackheart, the original, said, I had a good friend that lost his life because of this. That's sad. I'd like to know more about that makes me sad. Karnak said, blood is not family. Who you love and care about is family. That's true. But there are legitimate reasons to know who your actual dad is. The judge in question that we started this whole conversation with being the perfect case. You need to know for medical reasons.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to find out later on that, like he did at 70 years old, that your two sons are not. And I've seen, I want to get your opinion on this. A lot of people have commented that he's still their dad, but he's lost the opportunity to have his heritage continue, his bloodline, whatever word you want to use. As a guy, I get that. What do you think as a woman? To me, that's a big deal.
Legacy for men is different than legacy for women, but I do understand it, and that is a big deal. It's like if my brother dies without having any children, our family name will die with him because my only male cousins all changed their name. And it's kind of sad because our name is hundreds of years old. It's got quite the history attached to it. So, although I am kind of hoping he does die without any children, because
yeah, but, I mean, in my case, neither of my sons is going to have children, probably. So my name, at least on my level, will not continue on. My daughters had children. I have granddaughters,
but at the same time, legacy isn't just a name. It's also how you instill it, your family in, or how you raise your children. But I mean, I can totally understand why, you think you don't have this opportunity to carry on, like you have all this history, and you wanting it to carry on just in some small way, only to find that you have suddenly been robbed of that. Not only robbed of that, but when you thought it was secure, to find out suddenly that it is in fact not. I would say that's worse. Like, because knowing that you're not going to have any kids, you have the ability to come to terms with the fact that you're the end. But then here you are thinking that it goes on, only to abruptly realize that it doesn't, is like driving along and not seeing the pothole and then end up falling off a cliff with no warning.
It's, again, it is different for men than women, right? Women don't think about it as much. I'm not going to tell you I spend my every day wondering about it, but knowing that neither of my sons will probably have children, one's 35, one's 38, neither one of them's close to having a child. And that, my name is not going to carry on. I don't lose sleep over it, but I can't say I don't think about it occasionally or it doesn't bother me. But in that situation where you, like you said, you do think it's going to continue on, and you find out, well, the name will continue on, but it's not your bloodline. That's devastating to a man. It really is. Depending on the guy, it could be really devastating.
And I think that disconnect is one of the reasons why women don't get it, because guys will use that and say that often. I've heard them say it often. And many women just disregard it of like, that's no big deal. Who cares? And I'm like, you're only that dismissive because it doesn't matter to you. If it was
Right.
something that mattered to you, you'd be just as upset.
Yep. Remedial Genius said, I'll bet they'd try to find the mom if a man dropped off an infant at a fire station. I actually know of an instance of that, and that's exactly what they did. They were going crazy trying to find the mother. So it doesn't work in the. That was a few years ago. BMPOV said a single father raising a child is sometimes equal to or better than having both parents. I agree, but I think that could be the case too with moms.
In the metrics that we keep track of, graduating high school, prison unalivings, and a whole bunch of other stuff, a single dad household is just as good. A child raised in a single dad household is just as well off statistically as children raised in a two-parent household. The households that fall short are single mothers.
And if
In
you really
every
want to,
category.
yeah, if you want to look into a really good book about that, it was one of the things he covered, which has all the statistics supported and all the studies. Read The Boy Crisis by Dr. Warren Farrell. I had him on my podcast in October. He did extensive research into it. All of the data shows that especially boys would be better off if you're going to only give them to one parent. Boys in particular would be better off with their dads. But in general, there's always exceptions. Two parents is always better in general, but if it's a bad situation, then yeah, one parent who's going to do the right thing would be the better option. That's only my point on that. I had a great comment and then it jumped forward. So hang on a second.
I hate it when that happens.
Oh, it doesn't. So It's Legend had a question. What if a man, this goes back to the food thing. What if a man comes to visit his kid and brings them food, but not the woman's other children? Like McDonald's.
I think that kind of falls into the same category. Because it's not the children's fault. It's never the children's fault.
No, he's a scumbag. Sorry. If you knowingly do that, sorry, I'm not going to support you.
Now, if it's an accident, like you didn't know the kids were
an accident,
going to be there, that's fine. But if you knowingly leave the kids out, because it's not the kids' fault.
You're hurting the kids there. So no, I would never do something like, if I knew there were other kids and all right, I'm gonna stop and get my kid McDonald's. I don't know when I was doing it, a Happy Meal was $1.99. Now it's probably $10, but I would make sure that all the kids got it. It's just the right thing to do. I know some of you are going to disagree with that, but anyway. Peter said, I like this lady. We need more like her. I like her too. She's like my daughter from another mother. Squirrely girl. Here we go. Briefly, what's your experience with mums groups? The Angel Warrior would like to know.
Most of them are actually they call them mothers groups, but they should really be called I hate my husband groups, because that's what they talk about 99% of the time. I hate my husband and damn my crotch goblins. And I'm like, well, then why'd you marry him and why'd you have kids? Simple. And inevitably they go around the circle and then they look at me and I take that moment to say, I love my husband. He's the greatest husband and the greatest dad. And then they give me the look like, you ruined it. I'm excommunicated.
Abdullah say, hell, I hate saying these names. I'm horrible. And Squirrely doesn't mince words. That's for sure. No, really? She's so shy and unassuming.
And demure.
All right, here's a good one. A good point. It's Legend said, what I never understood is why when she is caught cheating, why does she insist on trying to talk him out of leaving her? There's a video going around, which I have downloaded. I'm going to be doing one of my give and takes on. It's a young girl who got caught cheating and blames it on her ovulation. She was ovulating. Oh, yeah. I can't wait. And he doesn't understand that has hormone. I'm paraphrasing. That has hormones, and she had no choice but to cheat.
Okay,
That will
so
be coming out shortly. I'll probably get banned for that one.
women are out here trying to convince the world that we're not slaves to our emotions, we're not slaves to our reproductive cycle, that we're supposed to be, you know, held the same, same standards as a guy, and we're all cerebral up here, and then we have that excuse.
I mean, I was like, I'm
I
watching
mean,
this video,
come
and
on.
I'm sitting here going, this has got to be fake, right? But looking at her face and reading the body language, I think she legitimately was saying that. And I was like, man, we have really reached a new low now. So imagine if a guy said that, well, my testosterone, that will fly. Yeah, it just never ceases to amaze me, some of the things that people had. Jacked Up said, Dan, you need to meet the guy from at whatever on here too. I would love to go on that podcast. They're not going to come on mine. But if you can get them to get me on their podcast, please help me out. The Whatever podcast, if you haven't seen it, go check it out. I'm not going to say much because I'm surprised they aren't banned. But they generally have lovely young ladies, as I like to put it, from OnlyFans on as guests. And
Oh, that one. Is it the guy who's like really really soft spoken and he doesn't really attack them? He just with logic.
Yeah,
I would kill to be on that podcast just to talk to some of these women and go, "Where is your self-respect? I ask you."
Yeah, I'm still trying to get on the Breakfast Club to counter Vivek Ramaswamy too, but they will not reply to me. So if you know them, help me out. I'm not going to try and say the name because it's nothing but things. The court regularly rules in the best interest of the child to force the non-father to pay. That's their argument for everything. It's in the best interest of the child. You always have to put it in quotes.
But best interest of the child is a nebulous term with no real definition. It's formless.
That's why they use it. And I would counter that by saying, how is it in the child's best interest to think that the dad they have might not be their actual dad? Just saying. Because I believe inevitably, almost certainly, this is going to get found out at some point. Even in my case, at some point, it probably would come out, but who knows? Oh boy, here we go. You ready? I'll let you handle this one. Deborah Tupia. Men are avoiding their responsibilities and placing the blame on women. Go.
How can men? It's not they're not the ones who lied. The responsibility lies on the person who lied. I literally said at the beginning that this is all about women escaping accountability, and you, my dear Patricia, just proved my freaking point. You're making us look bad. Stop it.
Right after that, we got placeholder 89 who says, wait, you can make money by having kids? I'm doing it wrong.
Apparently, I'm doing it wrong too.
Yeah, well, whatever. And then right after that, we got Michelle. Actually has a good point here. Can a woman get child support with the embryo that was not used during marriage but after marriage? Now, I am familiar with a case of that situation but it was slightly different. A man and woman were married. They got divorced. They were well separated at that point. The divorce was final, all that. They had frozen embryos. The mother went, got one of the embryos, forged the father's signature to get the embryos, impregnated herself, had the kid. Father said, I did not consent to this. It was a clear case of fraud. She even admitted she forged his signature, and he got ordered to pay child support. So there is case law, Michelle, that says, yes, she can get child support. Just saying.
That's science. That is like some sci-fi paternity fraud crap.
That's why I say to men, if you've frozen embryos and you get a divorce, get them destroyed in your divorce. Don't even consent to, well, you've got to have my signature and hers. No, because
No.
she went around that. Get them destroyed unless you want them. Right. But yeah, there is case law, well established case law is the phrases that I like to put it. Kwakwa said, I think if he isn't the dad, he should get paid back for the mother, meaning child support. What do you think on that?
Oh, if she's tricked him, she's basically defrauded him out of all this money. Absolutely, she should have to pay it back.
So
in
the
my opinion.
legalities, yeah, and I agree with you, but the legalities do not support that in most cases. So if you find you are a victim of paternity fraud, you can file a case in civil court, not criminal. This is why I argue that it needs to be criminal law, because that will support the civil case. Men have successfully won. They get nothing. They don't get their money back. One guy I know got $30,000. It cost him $50,000 to do the suit. So net is it cost him $20,000. So yes, you can file. Does not mean you're going to win. And if you do win, you're probably not going to get much. You're certainly not going to get your child support back. They're not going to take anything away from the child. They may go after the mother. Like you can get the odds of you collecting are anything, are slim and none, I meant to say. We only have about 4 minutes, so there's a ton more comments. I know I'm not going to get to them all, and I'm sorry, guys. Lindsay, what do you got to finish up with?
As regards the getting your money back portion of it, I would like to see a law that says that once the child has aged out, like reached the age of majority at 18 or 21, whenever they decide. 18 is the federal. Once the child is an adult and the mother is no longer supporting them, that the mother should have to pay it back out of her 401k, out of her retirement fund, out of, just her paycheck if she has to. They can garnish her wages. Because while I don't believe in punishing the child for it, I do absolutely believe in punishing the person who lied.
I concur on all of that, but I would add that it also should be handled criminally as well.
Well, yeah, you should be tried in criminal court.
If you were to go, as I talked about earlier, to a retiree and defraud them out of their retirement, you would go to, and you got caught and they proved it, you would go to jail. It's no different to me as far as, it's obviously a different situation, but you should be handled just like that criminal. And
I cannot think of an instance where if a man were to commit a similar level of fraud, that he would not go to prison. Women cannot claim that we want to be held equal to men without willing to pay the same consequences for actions that men. If men are going to go to prison for committing the same level of fraud, then women can go to prison for paternity fraud. Equality, bitch.
You stole my word. I was just about to say the word you're looking for is equality. You can't have one without the other.
Because equality is equality even when it's not in our favor.
Exactly. Final comment I'm going to throw out there, and I missed a bunch of them, is Squirrely playing the spoiler. Get Jacked Up said that. I thought I might get a snort on that one. And he said, terrific show. Guys, thank you all for watching. Obina, thank you for the roses. This was terrific. This was fun. I enjoyed this one. I knew we would get a ton. I mean, there are so many comments. I know I didn't get to them all. I'm sorry, guys.
I couldn't read them fast enough.
They're flying. And you're just seeing the ones on TikTok, probably. There's other ones also on Insta and there. We're here every Wednesday. Boy Meets Squirrel. I love that name. Whoever came up with it, was it Jacked Up?
Please
maybe?
Tell us.
Yes, if you came up with that name, because we want to give you cred for it. We're not paying you royalties because we don't make squat off of this. But we're here every Wednesday from 4 to 5:30 Eastern time, which is what, 3 to 4:30 your time?
Mm-hmm.
Midwest time. And we talk about different topics every week. Sometimes we make them fun. Sometimes we get into pretty serious stuff, but we like to have some laughs and share some thoughts and opinions, some of which will get us in trouble. So come back and join us next time on Say It.
Boy Meets Squirrel.
Boy Meets Squirrel. All right. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.